In 1950, over 1.8 million people called Detroit home. It had a vibrant industry with over 296,000 manufacturing jobs. Huge corporations were based there, such as GM, Chrysler, and Ford. However, today, Detroit is in major decline. From that high of 1.8 million, only 1/3 remain today. And of those automobile companies that once called Detroit their headquarters, today only one remains headquartered in Detroit. The city is in such a bad state of disrepair that some parts are even returning to nature. Detroit, however, is not alone in this decline. It is rather a symptom of the area called the Rust Belt. Today, most Americans have probably heard at least one reference to the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt is an area in the northeastern to midwestern United States. It earned its names due to significant economic decline that has plagued the region. Many in the Rust Belt want to stop this decline and bring the Rust Belt back from poverty. However, in order to do so, one must first understand the causes behind this decline. Scholars have frequently argued and debated these reasons, but it should be settled that the main reasons for this decline are due to the culture of the Rust Belt and labor conflicts that reduced cash influx to the Rust Belt and instead directed growth outward. The Rust Belt attitude is one that stifles growth and renewal with its heavy sense of pessimism. J.D. Vance points this out in his recent novel titled Hillbilly Eulogy. He states that surveys have found that working class whites are the most pessimistic group in America, and that those in the Rust Belt are more socially isolated than ever, and that they pass that isolation down to their children. In Vance's opinion, all of this, in his words, contributes to a culture that increasingly encourages social decay instead of counteracting it. Vance's example demonstrates that in order to change the Rust Belt, we must first change the attitude within the Rust Belt. America was built on optimism like that of Henry Ford or the Wright brothers. Pessimism, it does the opposite. It encourages further learned helplessness and increases the exponential decline of the Rust Belt. Another issue brought up in Adam Zeick's cartoon from 2008 demonstrates how the culture of the Rust Belt contributes to a negative image of it. The cartoon shows how their negative culture hurts those in the Rust Belt. By believing they were born into poverty and they will stay into poverty, it only strengthens this negative cycle that leads them into not caring about the poverty in the area around them. I think Stan Zhang sums this up best in his recent quotation taken from 2016, where he describes this poverty in his life.
You know, the people in Ohio, they're a problem. They're a menace to society. You know, all they do is nothing. They pay off their welfare. Nobody cares about that. Man, Ohio sucks. Heroin pipes, okay.
It has also been shown that labor conflicts have been a major impacting force in the decline of the Rust Belt. According to the academic article, Labor Market Conflicts and the Decline of the Rust Belt, labor conflicts have led to employment losses that were implicitly self-inflicted, and that these losses would have been much smaller had unions and firms been able to eliminate the chronic conflict and strife that characterized their relationships. This conflict between the unions and the industries forced companies to seek places outside the Rust Belt, such as the south of the United States and other nations such as China, to stay competitive in a global marketplace. When the industries left, so did the jobs, and so did the money. The article continues to illustrate this decline with a chart showing that labor productivity stagnated in the Rust Belt as time went on. And as these labor conflicts began to emerge, companies prefer stability, and unfortunately the Rust Belt continues to fail to offer this stability, this firm ground. Some critics have blamed the reason for the decline of the Rust Belt squarely on automation. Edward McClelland, in his article, How the Democrats Lost the Rust Belt, states that most of the jobs lost in the Rust Belt were lost due to automation. And he goes on to state that GM can now make as many cars with 5,000 workers as it did with 25,000 workers in the 1960s. While this point is technically true, and it is accurate that jobs have been lost to automation, it fails to explain why the Rust Belt has not regained new jobs in new industry. Other places in America, such as New Orleans, also had heavy industry but then lost it. However, these places did regain their industry or other forms of industry later on. However, the Rust Belt has not seen that. As pointed out previously, labor conflicts in the Rust Belt do provide an explanation for this, as they made it an undesirable place to invest with lots of labor conflicts between unions and companies. This failure to invest didn't allow the Rust Belt to expand into other industries that other places were able to expand into. No matter what one believes about the exact causes of the Rust Belt's decline, we should all be able to agree that the Rust Belt's ultimate goal should be to be helped and fixed and remove the rust. Even those who blame automation agree that the culture and the labor conflicts within the Rust Belt must be addressed in order for the Rust Belt to have recovery. People like Stanton Zang will continue to live in agonizing poverty until we address these problems. And while it may seem easy to ignore these problems or feel isolated from them, it's important to remember that the Rust Belt is a key swing area that can drastically affect the direction of the nation, which includes your life in an election.